They sent me that invitation thinking I'd crawl back broken. My ex-husband, his mama, and his new wife, all sitting there with their champagne, ready to laugh at my downfall. But when I pulled up in that Rolls-Royce wearing success like a second skin, baby, the look on their faces was priceless. Before I tell you how I walked into that room and changed everything, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because this story, it's about to show you exactly what happens when people count you out too soon. Now, let me take you back to where it all started. My name is Denise Thompson, and 10 years ago, I thought I'd found my happily ever after. I was 25, fresh out of college, working as a marketing coordinator at a small firm in Atlanta. That's where I met Trevor Williams. He was handsome, charming, worked in finance, and when he looked at me, I felt seen. We dated for 2 years before he proposed, and I said yes without hesitation. I thought I was marrying my best friend. Turns out I was marrying into a family that would spend the next 3 years trying to erase everything that made me who I was. From the very first time I met his mother, Gloria Williams, I knew something was off. She opened the door to their Buckhead estate, looked me up and down like I was something stuck to the bottom of her shoe, and said with this tight smile, "Oh, Trevor didn't mention you were so exotic." Exotic, like I was a parrot or a piece of furniture from somewhere far away. I should have run right then, but I was young and in love, and Trevor squeezed my hand and said his mama just needed time to warm up to me. Spoiler alert, she never did. The wedding was beautiful on the surface, but if you looked close enough, you could see the cracks. Gloria insisted on controlling every detail, and somehow everything I wanted got vetoed. I wanted to incorporate some of my family's traditions, maybe jump the broom, have some music that felt like home. She said it wouldn't fit the elegant aesthetic she was going for. My bridesmaids were my girls from college, my cousin, my sister. His side of the church was packed with country club friends and business associates who looked at my family like we were the entertainment. I remember standing at that altar, looking at Trevor, hoping that once we were married things would get better. They didn't. Living with Trevor meant living under Gloria's thumb. She had a key to our apartment and would just show up. I'd come home from work to find her rearranging my kitchen, criticizing how I folded towels, suggesting I needed to learn how to cook proper meals for her son. Never mind that Trevor couldn't boil water. It was always me who wasn't enough. His sister Candace was no better. She'd make these comments at family dinners, little digs wrapped up in concern. "Denise, have you thought about straightening your hair for the company Christmas party? You know, just to look more polished." Or my personal favorite, "It's so interesting how you people season everything so heavily. Trevor's stomach has been sensitive lately. You people, like I was a representative for my entire race every time I walked into that house. And Trevor? He'd just sit there. He'd change the subject or tell me later that I was being too sensitive, that his family meant well, that I needed to try harder to fit in. Fit in, like I was supposed to sand down every edge of myself until I was smooth enough for them to accept. I tried. Lord knows I tried. I smiled through the microaggressions. I laughed at jokes that weren't funny. I showed up to every family function and played the role of the grateful daughter-in-law who was so lucky to be included. But inside, I was disappearing. The money thing made it worse. Trevor insisted on handling all our finances. He said he was better with numbers, that I should focus on my job and let him manage the household accounts. Sounds reasonable, right? Except I didn't have access to our bank accounts. I had to ask for money like a child asking for allowance. He'd question every purchase I made, every dollar I spent on myself. But he never questioned the checks he wrote to his mother or the weekend golf trips with his boys. I felt trapped, like I was living in a golden cage that was slowly getting smaller. 3 years into our marriage, things started shifting. Trevor got a big promotion at his firm, and suddenly he was working late every night, coming home smelling like perfume that wasn't mine. I'm not stupid. I knew what was happening, but I was scared to face it. Then one night, I found the texts on his phone while he was in the shower. Her name was Bethany. She worked in his office. Blonde, bubbly, Everything his family had probably hoped he'd marry in the first place. The messages were detailed, intimate, cruel. They'd been seeing each other for 8 months. 8 months while I was at home trying to figure out why my husband barely touched me anymore. When I confronted him, he didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. He said he'd been unhappy for a while, that I'd changed, that maybe his mother had been right about us not being compatible. His mother. Even in our marriage falling apart, Gloria was there, whispering in his ear. He wanted a divorce, and he wanted it fast. I was so broken, so tired of fighting, that I just agreed. The settlement was a joke. We'd been married 3 years, and I walked away with $8,000 and whatever personal belongings I could fit in my Honda Civic. He kept the apartment, the savings, the investment accounts his parents had helped him build. I signed those papers with shaking hands and moved into a studio apartment in a neighborhood that made my sister cry when she helped me unpack. Those first 6 months after the divorce were the darkest of my life. I was working 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. Days I was still at the marketing firm, pretending everything was fine. Nights and weekends, I was waitressing at a chain restaurant, smiling at customers while my feet screamed and my heart ached. I'd come home to that tiny apartment, eat ramen noodles in the dark, and cry until I couldn't breathe. I felt like such a failure. Like maybe Gloria had been right. Maybe I wasn't good enough. Maybe I deserved everything that happened. But there was this one night, about 6 months in, when something shifted. I was sitting on my bathroom floor at 2 a.m, ugly crying into a towel, and I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I looked destroyed, empty, and something in me just snapped. Not in a breakdown way, but in a wake-up way. I realized that I'd spent 3 years letting other people define my worth, and another 6 months doing the same thing to myself, and I was done. I was so done. I made myself a promise right there on that cold tile floor. I would never, ever let anyone make me feel small again. The next day, I started researching online courses in digital marketing. I'd been good at my job, really good, but I'd never pushed myself further because Trevor always said I should be grateful just to have a position. Now I had nothing to lose. I enrolled in every certification program I could afford, staying up until 3 a.m. after my shifts, learning about SEO, social media strategy, brand development, analytics. I was exhausted all the time, running on coffee and spite, but I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. 6 months later, I quit the waitressing job and started taking on freelance clients. Just small stuff at first. A logo here, a social media audit there. But I was hungry in a way that scared me sometimes. Every client I landed, I treated like they were my only client. I delivered more than I promised, faster than they expected, better than they imagined. Word started spreading. I got a referral, then another, then another. I was still working my day job, but my nights and weekends were spent building something that was mine. That's when I met Angela Rodriguez at a networking event I almost didn't attend because I felt like an imposter. Angela was this powerhouse business consultant who'd built her own empire, and for some reason, she saw something in me. We got to talking, and I told her a little bit about what I was trying to build. A week later, she called me with an opportunity to pitch for one of her clients, a startup that needed a complete brand overhaul. It was way bigger than anything I'd done before, and I was terrified. But Angela looked me in the eye and said, "You're ready. Stop waiting for permission to be great." So I pitched. And I won. That first major client changed everything. The project paid me more than I'd made in 6 months of freelancing combined, and the results were so good that the client referred me to 3 other companies. Within a year, I'd quit my day job and officially launched Elevate Digital Solutions. I specialized in helping minority-owned businesses with branding and digital marketing, companies that had been overlooked or underestimated just like I had been. It felt like purpose work, not just business. The second year, I brought in $250,000 in revenue. The third year, I hit $1.2 million. I hired a team of 8 incredible people who believed in the mission as much as I did. I bought a house. Not a huge mansion or anything, but a beautiful 3-bedroom in a neighborhood with trees and good schools for whenever I decided to have kids. I bought myself a car that didn't make weird sounds when I turned corners. I traveled. I took my mama on a cruise. I started dressing in clothes that made me feel powerful instead of invisible. But here's the thing, I kept it all quiet. I deleted my social media except for my business accounts. I didn't go to events where I might run into Trevor's circle. I just built my life in peace, away from people who'd never believed I could. 3 years to the day after my divorce was finalized, a cream-colored envelope showed up in my mailbox. I recognized the handwriting immediately, Gloria's pretentious cursive with the extra flourishes. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. Inside was an invitation to a celebration at the Williams family estate, Trevor and Bethany's wedding anniversary party, their 3rd anniversary, which meant they'd gotten married less than a month after our divorce was final. The audacity. The sheer disrespect of sending me this invitation, knowing I'd see it as exactly what it was, a chance for them to parade their happiness in front of me, to show me how much better off Trevor was without me. I stood in my kitchen, holding that invitation, and felt all those old feelings trying to crawl back up my throat. Shame, anger, hurt. I almost threw it in the trash, but then I called Angela, because she's the voice of reason I need when my emotions get loud. I told her about the invitation, and she was quiet for a minute before she said, "So show them who you became. Not what you have, but who you are." And something about that clicked. This wasn't about proving anything to Trevor or Gloria or Bethany. This was about proving to myself that I could walk back into that space, the space where I'd felt the smallest, and stand tall. So I decided to go. And if I was going to go, I was going to do it right. I made appointments for everything. Hair, nails, a dress fitting at a boutique I'd been too intimidated to walk into before. I found this stunning emerald green dress, custom-fitted, that made me feel like royalty. I got my natural hair done in an elegant updo that took 3 hours but was worth every minute. And then, because I'd worked hard and earned the right to treat myself, I rented a Rolls-Royce Phantom for the evening. Midnight blue, cream leather interior, the kind of car that makes people stop and stare. The day of the party, I almost backed out a dozen times, but I kept hearing Angela's voice. "You're not going there for them. You're going there for you." So I got dressed, checked myself in the mirror, and had a moment where I almost didn't recognize the woman looking back at me. She was confident, successful, free. I got in that Rolls-Royce, and my hands were shaking as I drove to Buckhead, back to that estate where I'd spent so many nights feeling unwelcome. When I pulled up, the valet's eyes went wide. He practically tripped over himself to open my door. I stepped out slowly, letting the moment settle. The sun was just starting to set, casting everything in this golden light, and I could feel eyes on me immediately. I walked up those front steps in my heels, head high, shoulders back, and pushed open the door I'd once needed permission to enter. The party was in full swing, crystal chandeliers, champagne towers, string quartet playing in the corner, all of Trevor's family and their country club friends dressed to the nines, and then there was me. I saw Trevor first. He was standing by the bar with Bethany tucked under his arm, and when he looked up and saw me, the color drained from his face, like he'd seen a ghost. Bethany followed his gaze, and her smile faltered. She clutched his arm tighter, suddenly looking less like a confident wife and more like a woman who just realized she might not have won the prize she thought she had. Gloria spotted me next. She was holding court with a group of her friends, probably talking about her perfect son and his perfect marriage, and when she saw me, her fake smile cracked like cheap porcelain. Candace actually dropped her champagne glass. The sound of it shattering made several people turn to look, and suddenly I was the center of attention, not because I'd made a scene, but because I was there, looking like everything they'd convinced themselves I could never be. I didn't gloat, I didn't make a grand entrance speech. I just smiled warmly, greeted the people I passed, and accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server. I moved through that party like I belonged there because the truth was, I did. More than they knew. People I didn't recognize started approaching me, asking who I was, complimenting my dress, making conversation. When they asked what I did, I simply said, "I own a digital marketing firm." And when they asked which one, and I told them, several people's eyebrows shot up. 2 of them had heard of my company. One of them said her business partner had been trying to get a meeting with me for months. Trevor eventually worked up the courage to approach me, Bethany was still attached to his side, looking uncomfortable. He said, "Denise, you look different. Different. Not beautiful, not successful, not happy. Different. Like he couldn't quite process that I wasn't the broken woman he'd left behind." I smiled at him, a real genuine smile, and said, "I found myself after I lost you. Best trade I ever made." His jaw tightened, and Bethany's grip on his arm went white-knuckled, but I just excused myself and walked away. The moment I'd been dreading came about an hour in. Gloria cornered me near the powder room, away from the other guests. Her mask of politeness dropped, and she got close, voice low and venomous. "You think you're better than us now? You show up here in your fancy car, flaunting your little business, trying to make us look bad?" There it was, the real Gloria, the one who'd been hiding behind concern and propriety for 3 years of my marriage. But here's what she didn't understand. I wasn't that scared girl anymore. I looked her in the eye and said, calm as still water, "I never thought I was less than you. That was always your story, not mine. And honestly, Gloria, I should thank you. You gave me the greatest gift when you made it clear I'd never be good enough for your family. You showed me I didn't need your approval to be worthy. I was always worthy. I just had to believe it myself." She tried to sputter some response, tried to bring up the past, remind me of how I'd left with nothing, but I was done. I said, "I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to anger was keeping me from my peace. So thank you for the invitation and congratulations to Trevor and Bethany." And I walked away, leaving her standing there with her mouth open. I stayed for another hour because leaving too early would have looked like running. I exchanged business cards with 3 different people who wanted to talk about potential collaborations. I chatted with guests who had no idea who I was or what history I had with this family. And then, when I was ready, I said my goodbyes. I found Trevor one last time and said, "I forgive you. Not for you, for me." And I meant it. I wasn't carrying that weight anymore. I walked out to that Rolls-Royce, got in, and looked at the Williams estate in my rearview mirror as I drove away. And I smiled, not because I'd won some petty revenge, but because I was free. Really, truly free. I called Angela on the way home and just said, "I did it." She knew what I meant. When I got home to my house, my space, my peace, I took off those heels, wiped off my makeup, and sat on my couch in the quiet, and I felt proud, not of the car or the dress or the money, proud of the woman I'd become when life tried to break me. In the weeks after, I heard through mutual friends that 2 of the guests from the party had become major clients. I heard that Trevor's firm was struggling, that he'd made some bad investments and was stressed about money. I heard that Gloria had actually asked Bethany why she wasn't more ambitious and driven like Denise, which made me laugh out loud. The irony was delicious. But the truth is, none of that mattered. Their opinions, their struggles, their lives, it had nothing to do with me anymore. The real victory wasn't showing up in a Rolls-Royce or having a successful business. It was reclaiming my dignity. It was proving to myself that I was never the problem. It was building a life I was proud of, surrounded by people who loved me for exactly who I was. It was learning that sometimes the best thing someone can do is let you go, because on the other side of that heartbreak is the version of yourself you were always meant to become. Listen, I'm not telling you this story so you can go get revenge on your ex. I'm telling you this because somebody out there needs to hear it. When they count you out, when they try to break you, when they make you feel like you're not enough, that's just the universe clearing out the people who don't deserve to see your glory. My ex-husband and his family thought they were inviting me to watch them celebrate. Instead, they got a front row seat to my resurrection. If this story touched you, if you've ever been counted out and came back stronger, drop a comment below. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe because I've got more stories about turning pain into power. And remember, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming so unbothered that their opinions become background noise. Now go out there and build your Rolls-Royce moment. I'll see you in the next one.